to go back then, I think would be a rude awakening for a lot of people today in terms of what you could or couldn't do because of cultural and social enforcement. So that's my big concern today with things like critical race theory, Black Lives Matter, and commercials, that it's not so much about what's legal. You're allowed to go and do things. It's about someone will dig up a tweet from you from 10 years ago, and then you can never get a job again. You're basically being ostracized for something at the time was fine and now isn't.
Well,
that's cultural enforcement.
Imagine having such magnificent technology where you can do such a thing as tweet, and then someone else can dig up that tweet, and you don't need, and nobody's forcing you to sign up for Twitter in the first place. And there's the technology we're living with is what they would have called science fiction a very short time ago, let alone going back in the day. So, and I'm not saying let's go back and live like Washington and Jefferson. I'm saying we need to look at the ideas that they came up with, fine-tune them, and expand them to everybody, include all races and all 78 genders, I'm saying.
There's like 144. I mean that literally.
And they have, and anyone who identifies at any gender obviously has the right to do that. I think we all can agree with that. But they don't have the right to require somebody else to call them anything or to treat them any certain way.
Which is part of what I'm saying about cultural enforcement. So, look, obviously,
but also, like, you can't really speak about what's taking place in the culture and not acknowledge the fact that we have a largely meddled with economy. So we have business and government largely blended together, regulation and subsidies, right? So favors and penalties. You got to divorce the two, and that's exactly what the Founding Fathers should have done more explicitly. They did a pretty good job implementing a separation of state from economics. Not a perfect job, but a pretty good job. But they should have put it in writing. So in the Constitution, it should have said separate church from state, separate economics from state. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
I don't think separation of church and state is in the Constitution, though.
Wherever it is.
I think it was just like an ideal of the Founding Fathers that was enshrined in like their writings. And
I don't know if it is.
Maybe the Federalist Papers or something.
I think it is. Isn't it? Well, I guess the First Amendment is what you would say is kind of where we get that.
Right. The right of the individual to be.
This is the place for the highest cutting-edge intellectuals on the internet right now. We got Tim Pool, we got me, we got this mother.
hey.
And
just
of course,
ragging on Ian.
And producer
Lydia. Yes, so petulance.
Yeah. So here's what I mean by I want to go back to cultural enforcement. If we want to take these good ideas from the Founding Fathers, I completely agree with you. I want those to be put more in application today. Have the individual the right. Anybody who wants to identify as whatever they want can be respected and live their lives. But it's the authoritarianism. It's the if you don't say this, you're fired. Right? We had an actor on the show last week, and he was saying like he goes to these rehearsals and they're all announcing their pronouns, and it's not like there's a law, but you know what happens if you refuse to do it? You don't get your job and you don't work, and then you may as well find a different career, one that's not been infected by this cultural dogma. So if you want classical liberalism, you've got to contend with the fact that, politics is downstream from culture. We can get a bunch of great politicians to talk about a bunch of great ideas, but then if no one is willing to do certain things because they're scared their neighbors will yell at them, it just won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said you can't look at the way the world is going and people are having their livelihoods destroyed and all types of problems without acknowledging the fact we have a regulatory state and a largely tampered with economy. But I'll go further and say you can't look at the way people behave and what they believe without acknowledging the history of philosophy. So the fact we have a world where so many people think they can invent their own gender, or that we live in a world where people think that, calling for accomplices in basically overthrowing civil order is acceptable and that is conducive to life on Earth. It speaks to philosophical development. So I will offer you the following. After the Founding Fathers and the men of the Age of Reason, and maybe some women as well, I don't know, sort of came up with their innovations in philosophy, and they discovered that the nature of man calls for his rights to be protected by a government with a monopoly on force. And I think John Locke, have you even read Locke? Played a large role in providing people like Thomas Paine with those ideas. But after America was established, the intellectuals of the generations after them, they put all of their effort into basically reversing what the founders had implemented intellectually. So the what they call the before the progressives, the pragmatists pragmatism is the American philosophy, not the founders' philosophy, but like the post-founding American philosophy. You go to any public school, you go to any house of learning since, sometime in the 19th century and onward, pragmatism was like the American philosophy, which it was influenced by the Germans. It was influenced by Hegel and Kant and other philosophers who rejected certainty. They said, look, all you know is you can't be certain. I mean, they said a lot of other things too, but once that was in place, once intellectuals said that the individual cannot look at the world independently, observe it independently, and be rational about it, and make independently rational decisions and live and should be protected in doing so, that his right to do so should be protected. Once they were rejecting that type of independence and they rejected reason, in essence, the era of the founders was over. The era of the age of reason was over. And now you had educators basically training students to be well-socialized young boys and girls. They were teaching them to be sheep. They were teaching them not to think. And with each generation, we've seen it get worse. We've seen people get less independent, less rational. We've seen random acts of violence. In the 19th century, there would be someone who would shoot up people randomly, and it was shocking, but it happened. Obviously, jump forward to modern times, and before this lockdown, it was like every 2 weeks. It's
actually worse now.
Yeah, but I mean, when you reject reason at the highest levels of the intellectual world, then what do you expect kids to be taught in, elementary school?
Think about that idea of, divine providence or whatever, that just trust me, the Lord wills that I be king or whatever. You got to take away reason from an individual if you want to establish a system like that. For the longest time, people didn't reason. It just was. And so long as you had the zealotry, the king could maintain power. Yeah, I'm gonna make a statement that's gonna get me in trouble, but I'm gonna say it anyway.
Here we go.
Donald Trump's presidency is in a certain way similar to like the way you're describing the American Revolution and the founding fathers. You're angry now. See, hold on. Let me tell you why.
All right.
I'm not saying because
but
I'll get the idea. I'm not saying because Trump was right. I'm not saying because Trump was good. I'm saying because it was basically an affront to the established order. That Donald Trump was not supposed to win. Whatever it is he was doing was offensive to those in power. And so they very much did not like him and said, this can't happen again. I look back at the founding fathers and you have this point where there was a deviation away from the crown and the absolute authority of those who were, willed to be kings. And like you mentioned, all of a sudden, generation after generation, they've stripped away reason and taught children to be better and better sheep till now here we are.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people who like Trump, whom are not bad people, would probably say they were drawn to him for reasons that you described, because they see a sort of pushback against authority or being told what to do, and they see him as sort of this kind of independent guy that doesn't let the media or anyone tell him what to do. I get that, but left sort of unchecked, like kind of left without any correction, what Trump, I think, represents is just this dispensing with any sort of rational method. Trump says what passes through his head, and that becomes so-called reality, and his fans love it. They're willing to die on that hill, quite literally, I think. So
a decent amount of them. I would say, look, out of 74.2 million people, it was a much smaller fraction.
I'm not talking about anyone who voted for him, because a lot of people voted for Trump as the lesser of two evils, or even because they liked some things about him. But I mean, I'm talking about what Trump represents, the way he's influenced the Republican Party, the way he's influenced the way people go about politics. I think he definitely represents a serious development for the worse, but I get where you're coming from when you say that kind of emotionally he speaks to people, sort of like the ghost of the founding fathers. I
don't even mean that, though.
No.
I'm just saying, like, you have an established order. You have the Democratic and Republican establishment. And then all of a sudden Trump comes along and he's a bull just stampeding through and kind of just knocking over their stuff. I'm not saying there's an equivalence in his philosophy. I'm saying that you have kings, you have colonization, you have war, you have monarchs, autocrats. And here come the founding fathers saying, screw you, what are you going to do about it? Physically fought to
remember, the founding fathers were intellectuals, and when they weren't killing the British, they were taking a lot of time to make sure they got it right, and they had beliefs about the nature of man, and they were intellectuals, and they were really the one time in history that intellectuals were also blowing heads off, but then carefully crafting out a system of government. So I could basically flip that and say the way Trump behaves, the way he's willing to basically smash the system reminds me of some Attilas in history, some Genghis Khans.
No, for sure.
So, I mean, by the way, kings are not a natural fact of history. Like the rule of kings did not just evolve like the chimpanzee. The king. There was a time when there was, like, let's say, democracy in Greece. Far from perfect, but much better than just the king and the pope telling peasants how to live. There was Rome.
It devolved.
There was Rome, which was also a Senate type of system. There were ancient sort of ages of reason where they highly embraced reason and they really wanted to get it right. And so how did we go from that to the dark age, which very much exists?
Yeah, it seems like
you think we're getting into that?
It's possible.
I think it was the rejection of reason, which is why you get brutes in charge.
But real quick, sorry. Do you think we're heading into another dark age?
If we on the route we're going, absolutely. I'm sad to say. I mean, listen, I can't predict something like that. Like, let's say it's possible that authoritarianism is on the rise, but let's say technology is just developing so fast and people love it so much that the authoritarians don't want to take that away from people. Like, there's a number of outcomes where this can take us that I cannot predict. I can't just rationalistically say, nope, like all the things add up, like it all adds up, we're going to have authoritarianism. I can't predict that, but the way we're going, the way that reason is being rejected, the way that brute force is being celebrated, and we're seeing brute force a lot. And so to have somebody like Trump in such a prominent place in society, I think, sadly, does not say something positive about where we're heading. I like how many nods I've been getting from you. I'm happy. I feel comfortable. I'm happy to be here.
I'll just get your ideas and your thoughts. You know what I mean?
Appreciate
I'll give you mine, but I will clarify too. I'm not saying Trump is like the founding fathers. We can argue that there was an aberration in the established order where the founding fathers pushed us heavily towards individualism and freedom, and then with Trump, it was a rejection of establishment. They're not the same thing, right? So the point I was making more so was that the powers that be were outraged. And what I see is with Trump, there was this concerted effort to fortify the election, as Time Magazine called it, because they did not want Trump to become president again or to get reelected. With the founding fathers, I absolutely believe what you were saying is true. There's a lot of people, probably just because the system is exploitable. When you have freedom, it's very difficult to maintain because cheaters can cheat.
It's not true.
You don't think so? Then how have they done it?
How have they done what?
Over time, our system has been exploited to push for the lowest common denominator. Our school systems are making our youth institutionalized and incapable, and now we end up with a generation of millennials saddled with massive debt for degrees they can't use. And what skills have they earned from spending all this money and just being extracted essentially by Freddie Mac and Sally Mae? Those are the names of the company, or these big loans.
Freddie Mae or Sally Mae?
Well, I don't know what the companies are.
This is your place for mortgage info.
Yeah, that's right.
Mortgage.
We got all the news.
No, I just mean like.
Listen, I mean
to go from the founding fathers, freedom, to now have people demanding communism.
Well, not only are they demanding I don't even know how much people are demanding communism. I think people, like, let's say on the far left, are demanding something even uglier than communism, like some kind of Cambodian egalitarianism where everyone with any level of privilege is shaved down.
That's a scary thought.
Listen,
man.
I can sit here and throw red meat all day to people on the right and say these leftists are as bad as you think, but we're not only seeing calls for that, we're seeing calls for authoritarianism. People want Donald Trump to rule, and they want the next guy, Josh Hawley or somebody worse than him, to be like a populist, loudmouth piece of trash who does not care about principles. So how did we go from the founding fathers to this? Basically, it was the dispensing of reason. So the founding fathers did not emerge in a vacuum. They were part of a tradition of the development of philosophy. After them, like I said, the utilitarians, the pragmatists came along. What did the pragmatists say? They said you can't really live by principles, right? Principles are too constricting, and you don't really know if they're going to work. So what do? Just act and see if it worked. And so how do you know how to act, right? You can't use principles, right? So just whatever you feel, do what you feel, bro. That is, unfortunately, become the American way.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.